Hello, in this video we're going to go over a basic Git workflow, including using GitHub to host your repository so that others can see it. It's going to be pretty straightforward. We're not going to add too much extra to it. The app, we're not even going to have an app in this one. We're just going to have a file that we upload as our project so that we can see what happens when we change stuff and how to push those changes as commits. So, when working with Git, we're working with a version control software, which is a fancy word to say we're working with breadcrumbs, essentially. We're establishing a history of things that we've done, a trail of breadcrumbs, including the changes that we've made to our app, so that others can follow along, and so that we can review what we've done. So first, I'm going to head over to vscode. If you don't have it already, I highly encourage you to go get it. I'm going to be using both the command line Git interface as well as vscode's built-in Git interface in order to accomplish what we're accomplishing in this video. First thing we're going to do, we're going to go over, and I've just made this Git example as the main directory for the application. I went through and File, Open Folder, navigated over to where I have my stuff, Programming with Tim, and then Git example. When I select this inside of the Open Folder dialog, I can click Select Folder, and now we're open inside of there. So, I would like to make a very small I would like to make a file that I can upload to Git. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and make a readme.md so that we can see the outcome of it. Now, the readme.md, as a side note, is commonly used on sites like GitHub in order to tell users what they're looking at when they're looking at your project. In this case, we're just going to do a hello world. I'll show you where this winds up in just a minute when we get it up on GitHub. So if we have this, we now have a project. It's nothing fancy, right? It's just a README that says hello world. But let's say I want to share this project with other people. I'm going to start by keeping track of the history using Git. In my terminal, which I've opened using Control-Shift-tilde, but you can also open via terminal, new terminal, or with whatever command is here. I'm going to go ahead and initialize the Git project. So I'm going to say git init. If you don't have Git, not GitHub, if you don't have Git installed on your local computer, you will need to go get that as well. So I ran git init. This initializes a Git project inside of the directory that I'm currently inside of, this C Programming with Tim Git example. You'll notice that VS Code picked up on the fact that this exists. It went over and highlighted this file in green and said, this is an untracked file. In other words, it hasn't been added to the Git history yet, and it's green because it's new. So inside of my Git project, rather, I would like to now go over and remember that I made this change, that I created this new file and that I tucked this text inside of it. So I'm going to create a branch using git checkout -b as in boy, and I'm going to name my branch main. You usually name your main branch main. They've been called master in the past. Good practice has said that we should navigate over to main. So if I run that command, we'll see that we've switched to a new branch named main. Another thing that I want to point out is down here, VS Code now recognizes that we're on the main branch as well. So if I've now created this main branch, I now have a branch that I can start leaving breadcrumbs on. So my first breadcrumb is going to be a breadcrumb that says, I created this file, I put this text inside of it. In order to do that, there's two main commands we want to run. First is git add. Now, git add stages files or stages changes for the next commit that we're going to make. It just tells Git, hey, get ready to put these inside of the next commit. The commit being the actual breadcrumb we're going to make. So I'll do git add, and I'm going to do git add dot. Now git add dot will add all changes to the stage for the next commit. Sometimes you want to be a little bit more granular than this, but for this example, we do want to add all of our changes. So I'm going to run git add dot. It's not going to give me any feedback, but if I run git status, it will tell me, hey, we're on branch main. There's no commits on this branch yet, and you have staged the new file of readme.md to be committed in your next commit. So before I ran this, it would have said, let's see, git rm-cached index or readme.md. So if I do git status now, it says, hey, this is an untracked file. This is a new file to the Git project. And it puts it in red here saying you have not yet staged this. So I'm going to go ahead and run that git add dot again. By the way, rather than typing this out, I'm hitting the up arrow on my keyboard in order to navigate through the previous commands that I've run. If I run this git add dot, we can see if I do git status again, that, yep, cool, it's staged for commit. Now I want to commit this. So I'm going to run git commit -m. Git commit itself creates the new commit. -m allows me to give a message for this commit. A message is required for every commit. So if I do this, I'm going to pop open quotation marks and say added readme, something to describe the changes that were made during this commit. I'll hit enter, and there we go. It confirms that, hey, we went in create mode, we created this readme.md, one file was changed, and one line inside of the files that were changed was added, which checks out against what we have. I added this one line of hello world inside of here, inside of this new file named readme.md. Now, I've made this commit this way. There's another way that we can go through this same process, starting from git add dot downwards. And that's to use vscode's built-in version control software interface, or source control. So if we click on this icon, we can see that it's empty right now. I'm going to go ahead and add something to this. First change. Sounds good. If I do that, you'll notice that readme.md is in yellow, and instead of having a U, it's now M. I have modified this tracked file. And inside of here, we'll see that these two lines are green because these are the two new lines that I've added. Over to the left, inside of the source control interface, we'll see, readme.md has been modified. This is identical to git status. We're asking for the current status, and this one is currently untracked. So we're up here in this state right now. If I want to stage this for commit, basically run that git add, I can come over here and press the plus sign when I hover over the file. Now I've staged this change. So with that, I can make a commit. So I've done git add, essentially git add dot. Then I've run git status to see, yes, now this is staged for change. Or it's a staged change for the next commit. I'll go ahead and say added first change, and this is the message that will be added when I actually press this commit button, which is equivalent to running git commit. So we can see that this is a little bit easier than going through and having to remember the terminal commands, though it is valuable to know the terminal commands. So I've said that I'm staging this, I've added my message, and I'm going to hit commit. Cool. I've now created a new commit with that change to that file, in the same way that I did when I created the original file. Now, that's the Git workflow in general. Now I would like to go over and add a remote to this local Git repository that lives on my computer. The remote is going to be something that lives on a website somewhere where others can go over and access it. In this case, I'm going to use GitHub as my remote repository website. So I have GitHub open over here. In order to create a new repository, head over to github.com, click on your avatar up here, click on your repositories. Up in the top right, there's a new button. Also, I just noticed this. There's a new button over here too, at justgithub.com if you're signed in. 6 of these have dozen, the other does the same thing. So, if I click New, it presents me with the Create a New Repository wizard. To buzz through this really quick, the only thing that we need, and the only thing that we should add for this, is the repository name. The reason that I say this is we have a project on our computer that we would like to get up to GitHub. So we're not going to add anything else. We're not going to touch anything else because that might cause a confliction. It might conflict with what we have locally. In fact, it will conflict. I'm going to call this Git. What was it? Git example. And that's it. Then I'll click Create Repository. And there we go. So now I have an empty Git example repository on GitHub. I'm going to copy this URL here in its totality. You can click this little copy button to do the same thing. Over here, I'm now going to link my local repository with that remote repository that I just set up. And it's a bunch of words to say. I'm going to run git remote add origin and then that URL that I copied. What this will do is it will register a new remote named origin at this URL for this particular project. If I run that, and I run git remote-v, as in Victor, we can see that I have a fetch and push, so an up and down of origin at that path. So now, if I wanted to push this project up to this remote repository, I can do that by running git push origin main. By doing this, I'm telling Git to push my project to a remote repository by the name of origin, so that's why we set up the name of origin up here, on the branch of main. If I run this, it goes through and says, let me go ahead and do all the things that I need to do. I push my local main to my remote main on that remote repository, and if we come back over here and give it a refresh, dun, da, da, there's our readme.md with the, if I move over to code, hello world and first change. And you can see, you can see what I meant by GitHub uses this as an introduction to your project. Basically, MD is Markdown. It's a quick way to write HTML without using HTML tags, with just using the Markdown syntax. In this case, I've used a pound sign at the beginning of this line to indicate that it should be an H1. So nothing too fancy to it. We just got our hello world. So with that, we've walked through the full Git workflow, but let's go ahead and add another change to show how this works in vscode. So, a super exciting second change right here. I'll go ahead and save it. If we head over here, also, by the way, you'll see the number of outstanding changes that you've made since your last commit as a little blue bubble on this icon. All right, so I've done that. I've made my change. You know I'm going to make this a really fun commit message. Second change. I'm going to go ahead and stage all of my changes, and commit. Now, VS Code, It should recognize that I have a remote. This should say something slightly different, but it should be fine. If I click this big blue button after doing a commit, it thinks it's publishing the branch, but really it's pushing it up. It's using git push. Over here, there she is, second change, just now. Here's my hello world, first change, second change. If I head over to this button right here that says 3 commits, I can see all 3 commits that I've made. This is the value of Git in general. GitHub just has a really fancy way of showing it. So if I click on this, I can see my project at the first commit when I put the pound hello world. If I click on this, I can see my project where I did first change. If I do this, obviously I can see first change and second change. So, with that done, we've walked through the entirety of an example of using Git and GitHub to manage a repository. The Git part is the local part. We can go over and manage it either using terminal or using vscode's built-in integration, whichever is easier for you. And over on the remote, if we push it up from our local computer to github.com, we can see the changes, and other people can come in and see our code as well. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave a comment in the comments. Like and subscribe. Thank you so much.